Good. How are you?
Good. I'm glad to be here today.
It's nice to be here too.
So I was inspired to request you to do one of the Butterfly interview series because it was a long time ago that we met, and we've been connected for many years. And through that time, I've really been witness to a beautiful kind of transition. And before that, I know that you have a really beautiful history of how you've come to where you are now.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been so inspired by it that I would love to share it with others. So if you don't mind, I would love to hear your version of your butterfly moment. And if you'd like to start with a little history of where you came from, and then you can go from there.
So I grew up in New Jersey and was raised with my sister and my mom. My mother was a single mom. So we'd left my dad, and I was about 8. He was an addict and alcoholic, and my mom really did her best to kind of hold both roles for us. And there was a lot of really expansive female empowerment roles in my family growing up with my mom and my sister. We were surrounded by a really amazing circle of women, and I refer to growing up around the kitchen table a lot, where we just drank tea and we talked, and there was a lot of shared female wisdom at that table. And it was friends and family, cousins and aunts, and a lot of strong support in that. So I feel like I grew up in a women's circle, which is really lovely. The negative side of that is I didn't have a very strong sense of male role in my life, and given the background with my dad, it was hard to hold trust or see a strong male role model. So I didn't really have that, but I certainly had a strong female role model. And so that was great, but the piece of it that was still a little bit needing to be worked on is that growing up with an addict and an alcoholic, the people around them tend to go into codependent behaviors, right? My mother, myself, I think my younger sister didn't really do that. And I have another sister as well who was 10 years younger than I am. And, you grow up kind of pleasing, right? People pleasing, and that's the codependent in you, and wanting approval and wanting to, thinking that I was able to be better or be kinder or not cause trouble for my dad, that maybe he would be okay. Mm-hmm. And so I think, that's a piece that I carried with me till I was about 30, when I had this kind of moment of clarity and a real reckoning of something needing to change, and a grounded pursuit of that change from that moment on.
And tell me a little bit about when you had that moment of identifying that you wanted to change. What did that moment feel like to you?
Well, I was married to my ex-husband, and we were together for a long time. We were about 21 when we started dating, and we'd done what everybody in our community did. You grow up, you find somebody, you get married, you get a job, you work hard, and following the script of what our community was telling us was the appropriate next step. So I really loved him. He was a great, great guy. Had some of his own struggles with alcohol and just self-esteem and wanting to grow, but not really knowing how to do that, not really recognizing when he would get in his own way, and myself included. Really, taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and, pursuing my psychology degree at that time, really inspired and motivated by the idea of self, growth and personal development, right? And so really reading self-help books and practicing yoga and doing it all very scattered, so pieces of wisdom coming in, but nothing consistent to ground it. And I remember it was my 30th birthday, and I remember going into the bathroom at our apartment and looking in the mirror and really clearly not recognizing who I saw in the mirror. And it was so bizarre to me because I knew I was standing in the bathroom looking at myself in the mirror, but I was very, very clear that I had no idea who that person was. And I remember going up to the mirror really, really closely and just staring into the pupils in my eyes, and I could see myself, I could see my spirit and that soul, you know, that authentic part of my soul, so small in my eyes. And I felt in that moment that I was about to disappear, and I had to do something to stop that, otherwise I was going to be gone. And I think that so many people in our society, women especially, get lost, and I felt like I was at that precipice of losing myself. And right around that time, I remember like looking in these windows as I was driving around and seeing these houses, you know, and the smoke coming out of the chimney and lights on in the window, and really wondering if everyone who lived in all of these houses and all of these windows with all of these lights on felt so lost the way I did. And I remember feeling really sad about that if we're all walking around feeling lost, that's just not a good existence for anyone. So it was at that point that I decided, okay, I've got to deconstruct everything that I've put together in my life to really get myself back, and that might look very, very different. And so it took me about 1.5 years, but I ended the relationship, and I moved out of the state. I took my first yoga teacher training, and I moved up to the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies in upstate New York, and I lived there for about 3 years.
And where do you feel like you got the strength and courage to make such a gigantic leap and decide to really pursue finding yourself for the first time, it sounds like, at 30?
You know, I think a lot of this goes back to my upbringing with my mom, and, you know, my circle of women around me. My sister, for sure, is still my best friend, and she and I always had the relationship where we would be brutally honest with each other, and, you know, tell each other the truth, even if it was painful and we needed to do something about it. We still do that to this day. And my mom, you know, I remember going over when I was in that mix of, you know, trying to establish the fact that I needed to leave my husband, and telling him, and losing all the family and all the friends and all the support that I had established for the first 30 years of my life, to making this big change. And I remember, you know, going over to my mom when I was feeling particularly sad one day, and just crying and being really unsure. And my mother was always so brave, and, you know, worked so hard, and just was able to, you know, she always did her best. And she said to me, honey, it's, you know, I just was like, I don't know what I should do. And, you know, I was really upset. And she just looked at me and she said, honey, you outgrew him a long time ago. And I was so floored by that she'd noticed that I'd grown, you know, out of the relationship, but I had continued to stay anyway. And I asked her, why didn't she tell me? Why didn't you tell me that I had outgrown him and that, you know, place in my life? And she was so clear, and she was just like, it's not for me to tell you. That's yours to figure out. And so I felt like she believed that I was able to do this, right? And that I could do it, and that I was completely accepted no matter what I did. And, you know, I started dating somebody, and, you know, that was a little while after that, but I moved up to Omega Institute, and I really just let go of the confines of my life. I saved up enough money so that I could leave my apartment, paid my bills for the year so that I could live on $70 a week, and just live, just played and did yoga and danced and cried, and spent, you know, the first 5 months after leaving just grieving the relationship and grieving who I was trying to be, that I thought the world wanted, that I thought I was supposed to be, and really finding that I was so unhappy that I had to just shed all of that. And it felt kind of like I was shedding this skin of what I was supposed to be in this relationship and in this society, because it just didn't fit, and it was suffocating the life out of me. So stayed there for about 3 years, and really enjoyed every moment of living at Omega, and you know, the people that I met that I'm still really close to, and my then best friend and partner, who is still my best friend, decided that we would relocate to California and start a life out here. And so we did, and she went to pursue a higher degree, and as did I. And I began to start to take the goodness that I learned at Omega about being this playful, expansive, creative, trusting being, and integrate it into the real world, right? Because it's easy to be that when you're living on a commune, essentially, right? But it's hard to be that open and be that trusting and be that present when you're living with the stresses of making a living and going to school or being in a relationship and paying your own bills and all of that. And so it was really for me about not just being able to live there and do that, but it was to live, you know, the life of a householder, as we would say in Kundalini Yoga, and have all the stresses and the responsibilities and still not get lost.
And how do you feel like you've been able to do that? What does it look like now compared to back then?
Well, I think it looks like maintaining a consistent relationship with myself as the priority, maintaining the relationships with the people that are around me that help me to remember who I am if I forget. It's having a partner who I'm just newly married now, and he's an amazing partner. He's always striving for his best, and healthy striving, not perfectionist striving, but he is always supportive of me doing my best. And when he sees that I'm cutting corners or that I'm maybe not standing in my power, he will ask if I similar to the relationship with my sister, that honest relationship where he's able to say, well, this is what I see you doing, and I see that you might be holding back here. Do you need help with that? And so he'll give me really supportive perspective. He wants me to be doing my best, and he's been one of the greatest teachers for me, how to work smarter, not necessarily harder, how to really stay connected to my integrity and my truth, to practice discipline. So those are the key values that I'm focusing on now, that are continuing to maintain that perspective of that authentic self that I found at Omega, and how she integrates into the real world and shows up every day. And every day I'm continuing to work on that, whether it's improving my diet or trying to meditate a little bit longer or building my yoga practice or building my business and really expressing myself the way I feel is my best self, and helping people to find their best self. And I think one of the core pieces for me goes back to knowing that there was a lot of painful things in my past, and that I always trust, even to this day, that everyone that I've encountered, whether they were harmful situations or painful situations, that everyone was doing the absolute best they could in the moment. And I have compassion for their journey and our intersection of our journeys, and I'm actually grateful for every moment of it. So there's some, abusive things that may have taken place, and some joyful things, and some experiences that I wouldn't give any one of them up, because who I am now and who I get to be in service to people, it's taught me something, and it helps me relate to people in the work that I do as a therapist, in the work that I do as a yoga teacher, that keeps me clear, and it keeps me compassionate to myself and everyone that I've met along the way. And I think that's the biggest key for me, is to really know that in every moment we're all doing the best that we can, and if we can support each other, then maybe we can do a little bit better together.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's really, I think that's one of the gifts of becoming authentic, is realizing that everything that has occurred up until now has led to your authentic, beautiful self, and you wouldn't want to give a moment of that up.
Absolutely.
And and I really have seen you embody that through the years, so I appreciate all that. Do you have any few words that you would suggest to somebody that might be at this stage where they feel like a risk feels really big, but it's not fitting anymore?
I think the best thing that I can say is I know that place, and I know that pain that it takes to stay where you are. And although it seems really scary to think about leaving that familiarity of what you know, and the monster we know versus the monster we don't know. And I think that it becomes so much more painful to stay where it doesn't fit you anymore, that you've got to just stand on the edge and practice trust and practice standing in your most fierce place to really know that you're going to be okay, and no matter what happens, that it's better than staying comfortable. As Brene Brown would say, it's better to be courageous than comfortable. And you can't be both. You either have to be courageous or you can be comfortable, but you can't be both at any one time.
Well, thank you, Dawn. That was beautifully said. And I appreciate all your vulnerability and sharing.